All right, well, we're glad you all have joined us this morning. We're going to be talking about how we can use art at home with our loved ones who have Alzheimer's or any other kind of dementia. Memories in the Making is a program that was developed here in Orange County over 20 years ago by one of our volunteers. She wanted to see if art could be used with her mother who had Alzheimer's. Through her work and the cooperation of another volunteer, they put together the guidelines that has become Memories in the Making, which is now the signature art program of Alzheimer's Orange County. And it's not just in Orange County or Southern California, but it's all across the country and in other countries as well. So it's been a really, really great program with lots of benefits that we're going to talk about. So let's look at the things that we want to cover today. We're going to talk about the principles of Memories in the Making, some tips about communicating, how we can be compassionate in our communication, and be most effective at connecting with our loved one, engaging. That's what we want to do. Art is a tool for making that connection. It's really not about the art itself, although it's wonderful when we see a piece of art that's been created that is just delightful, that reveals the beauty and joy of life. But even more important is the intimacy of the communication that we're establishing with our loved ones. So art is one way to do that. Music is another way. With my wife, who has advanced Alzheimer's, music is the primary way that we communicate. But everybody's a little bit different, and so art is a great way for a lot of people. We'll talk about nuts and bolts, that is the specifics of how you set up an art session. What are the things you need, the materials? And we've got a materials list that you can pull up off of our website, and a bunch of other stuff that we'll get to along the way. But I just want to talk about this image for a minute. I just love this piece that Patricia did. You can just imagine when she was asked, what do you want to call this? And she's saying, I left my heart, and we're thinking San Francisco, but she says, Winnipeg. And we think, oh, there's a story here. Tell us about Winnipeg. Did you grow up in Winnipeg? So it's an opportunity to engage and to learn about individuals in ways that we wouldn't otherwise get to hear. There might be stories that come up through reminiscing that we wouldn't hear otherwise. And so lots of ways that art will communicate. And so it's not just about having an activity to keep our loved one busy. It's really a meaningful process that will get our loved ones engaged, contentedly engaged. That's the goal. So I left my heart in Winnipeg. It tells us a lot. So let's go to the next slide, Melissa. And we see the idea communicated here, where the facilitator is reaching out to an artist and making a physical connection, as well as the facial eye contact. There may or may not be conversation, but there's a connection. That's what we want to do. We want to find the way to make that connection. Facilitators, this is not about teaching art. It's about creating an environment in which our loved ones feel free to express themselves. They feel free to play, because play is at the heart of creativity. Now let's go to the next slide, Melissa. So reminiscing, like Patricia's painting, I left my heart in Winnipeg. Here, Jerry painted what he titled Mystery War Trees. And Jerry said to the facilitator, the trees are dark, mysterious. That's what it was like in Japan during the war. That's the way I remember it. And you just feel the intensity of Jerry's experience and how rich it is that he's sharing that experience with us. Now, in this case, the facilitator, as I tell that story, I get goosebumps. And that is how the facilitator felt, because this is really, to her, it was really significant. And so she called Jerry's wife to talk about what Jerry had painted and what Jerry said. And she's relating the conversation, and Jerry's wife starts laughing. And she says, Jerry was never in the war. Jerry was a kid during the war, but he was a war buff. And so he had read all the World War II war books and seen all the documentaries. And so in his mind, he had been there, and he's remembering that. And so one of the ways that we respect artists is that we don't question or try to correct their memories. However they remember it is real. And so we honor that, and we don't correct. But reminiscing is just a beautiful thing. Again, it's a connection, and we learn about our loved ones. Another example that I think of on this subject, it was in an adult day program where they had memories in the making, and one of the artists would paint the same scene over and over every week. And the facilitator spoke to the family member, it turned out to be an adult daughter, and described the painting that her father had done. And the daughter said, oh, I know where that is. That's where my parents spent their honeymoon. You go, wow, that is just rich. That's the power, the memory, and how important it is for the artist. And so we want to honor that. Let's go to the next slide, Melissa. So one thing that we want to understand is that art reflects emotion. So both of these images were painted by the same artist about 3 months apart. And on the left, the first image, you can see it's kind of bleak. And she said, I tried to make it green, but it kept coming out black. That was her emotion. She had just moved into a new facility. It was not settled, was not comfortable yet. But 3 months later, she paints a similar scene, but with color and vibrancy and whimsy with the tire swing. And she says, I want to be there. And so we hear emotion from the artist. And again, we accept whatever they tell us. We listen. Listening is one of the most important communication skills. I have to remind myself so often, just shut up and listen, because they have things to tell us. Even if the artist doesn't have any verbal ability left, like my wife really doesn't speak, just her body language is communicating to me, and I can see it in her face, and she's telling me that she's content or that she's uncomfortable, something, and I just want to receive that and support her in that, not try to drag her out of whatever mood she might be in. But let the art communicate. Let their body language communicate. So another principle in communication is that our words have much less significance than we would think. Studies have shown that in a population of people who have dementia, words carry only about 7% of the message. The great majority of the message comes through body language. So we're talking about not only our posture, but our gestures and our facial expressions. Anything that's nonverbal is communicating to our loved ones, to the artists. And likewise, their body language, their gestures, their facial expressions are communicating to us. And so it's our job to observe, to listen, to discern, and provide some affirmation. Let them know that we hear what they're telling us. Maybe it's just something simple that's physical. If I'm with my wife and I see she's kind of going like this, it's pretty obvious that she's cold. And so I'll ask her just a simple yes or no question. Are you cold? And she'll go, well, let's get you a jacket. So she can communicate with yes or no questions some of the time. So just the observation, whatever the artist is doing is going to tell us something about how they're feeling. So let's go to the next slide, Melissa. Here's another example, beauty in the expanse of time. So Joanne painted this and she talked about how there's movement. It's dark, but the green is coming. You can see there's movement. It expresses hope. Now in this case, Joanne's painting was submitted for an annual art collection that we create. We invite facilities and families to submit art, and we evaluate. We get all the art together and review it. We have what we call an art jury, and some of those pieces get selected, and some of them get framed and are then available for sale. In this case, that year we had an auction, and Joanne's painting sold for $800, and Joanne was there, and you can imagine how positive, what a positive effect that had on her to realize how significant her work was to the person who bought it. Now, the interesting part of the story, a couple of months later, Joanne was overheard to tell some other residents that her painting had sold for $2,500. And again, it's sweet, but it doesn't matter if she doesn't remember accurately that it was $800. And so we wouldn't correct her in that. That's part of respect. We go with the flow in whatever they tell us. But the main thing was how she felt, the satisfaction of her artwork, of her identity as an artist. And that was what was important. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Melissa. So another thing we learn is that play frees creativity. Now this image, dogs diving, Chris painted, and you can just see the enthusiasm, the excitement, the joy of life expressed in this playful scene of dogs just going around and around into the wading pool, back up to the top, and again and again and again. And it's that kind of sense of play that we want to engage, to encourage. Now, interestingly, Chris has done a number of paintings that have been part of our annual art collections. And he was never an artist before his dementia. He was in athletics. He was a football and basketball coach in high school and college level. And it was only after his dementia developed that he found he had an artistic flair. I mean, really, it's really a flair. And so just being able to relax and see what happens, try something, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Throw it away, start over, do something new. It's really about play. And so many times, so many examples of, I find myself doing this, that I try to be too controlling. I want things to come out a certain way, and that hinders creativity. And so I have to remind myself, just let it go. See what will happen. What if I do this and try it? And so that's what Chris has done so well. And we just love the enthusiasm that's expressed in his art. So all behavior has meaning. Every single thing that our loved ones do is telling us something. And it's our job as caregivers, or as we like to say, care partners. When we're caring for a family member or a friend, we refer to ourselves as care partners. And we look for, we take on the attitude that I'm going to be a detective. I'm going to observe and listen and see if I can figure out what my loved one is telling me. Now, in this piece that Alan did, Alan was in a very advanced stage of Alzheimer's. It was completely uncommunicative. And so he was brought into the art session, and the facilitator tried various techniques to get him started, and he just wouldn't do anything. So after 3 weeks, the facilitator decided to give him a marker. And so she took a black marker and put it in his hand. And he's got paper on the table in front of him. And then she went to work with someone else around the table. And when she came back, this is what she saw. These 3 letter R with a circle around it. And she didn't know what that meant, but she had a pretty good idea that it was significant. And so she spoke to the administrator of that facility to see if anybody knew what that meant, and nobody did. And so the administrator called family contact, again, an adult daughter, and described what her father had done. And the daughter is just in tears. And as the story came out, Alan's wife's name was Ruth. And whenever he would write a note to his wife, he would start with R and a circle. That was the way he wrote every note. And the daughter, of course, that's memory. And she had no idea that her father had even that capability to draw on a long-term memory. But it tells us, he's saying to all of us, I'm still here. And I still miss my wife. So we learn, and we might have to ask questions of other people if you know, to the best of our ability, we can't figure out what this is. Does anybody else know? Does anybody else have any other background? And it enriches our lives, just like the process of creating art enriches the artist's life. So that's one of my favorite pieces. That's another one that gives me goosebumps whenever I tell that story. Let me pause here for just a minute and say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask your question, or type it in the chat box. Either way, whatever you're comfortable with, and we'd be glad to take questions. I think what we'll do now is go to the next slide and talk about what we call the nuts and bolts. How do you set it up? And so here's a photograph I took of my setup. I don't know if you can see in the background of my guest room here, where I've got an easel set up on a nightstand. I've got some craft paper covering it. That's not necessary to cover it, but you might want to, just to make cleanup easier. I've got on the shelf behind me a photograph that I'm using, what we call an inspiration. We give artists a picture to work from, and many will paint their own image of their own version of that image. And we often collect photographs from calendars. And so I've got a number of calendar images that I like and I keep on hand to use. And you can collect calendars. You can ask family and friends to give you their old calendars when they're done with them, or if they received 6 in the mail one year, give you the ones that they don't need. So you want to have the watercolor paper, and if you're not familiar with watercolor paper, you can buy it at any of the art and craft stores. You can order it from Amazon and other online art supply stores. We recommend heavy watercolor paper. What's called 90-pound paper is kind of the minimum weight. The heavier, the better. I've got 140-pound paper on my easel. It's a little more expensive, but it really does make a difference to use high-quality paper. Now I've got in this image, I've got the paper taped up on a piece of cardboard. You don't have to do it that way, nor do you have to have it on an easel. It can be on a table or a nightstand like I have here. Whatever works in your situation. And a number of other things you want to have. You can see the inspiration photograph is on a little easel. Let me grab the one that I've got here on the shelf. So this is just a simple wire easel that you can buy. They're not very expensive. You could make your own if you want, but it's good to have the calendar image propped up where it's easy to see. It's a little harder when it's flat on a table. So we like to use a little easel to get it up at an angle like that. And of course, you want some paints. We recommend that you use watercolor paints because they're easy to clean up and they're non-toxic. And in some cases, artists may not have the awareness that it's paint, especially when we've got some water in a bowl for the watercolor, for mixing the colors. We want to use a bowl, for example, rather than a cup, because a cup just invites picking it up and drinking. Now, if it's watercolor paint, it's not going to hurt anybody, but we try to avoid that by using a bowl, so it's just not inviting drinking it. So we've got some paper towels we want to have handy. I have a sponge. I have a variety of brushes. And let's see, I guess those are the main things. On my easel here in the room, I have a set of watercolor markers. So you can use markers, you can combine watercolor paints and markers or pencil. Be careful about using a permanent ink just because it might get on clothing or some of the furniture. Anything that's water-based is what we recommend. Now we've got a list of art supplies on our website. If you want to have more specifics, you can go to our website, alzoc.org, and under Memories in the Making and Facilitator Training, we have a list of art supplies and some other references. And Melissa's putting that in the chat box, the link to the website where you can find those documents.
I'll also email that to everyone that's attending right now, so no need to scramble.
Thank you, Melissa. Another thing that we'll have on our website, it wasn't there this morning when I checked, but we'll have it done sometime today, is a handout that we use a lot called Caring Conversations. And it's just, again, some tips and tricks about communicating and connecting. There's things to keep in mind. For example, not correcting, not going into long explanations about things, listening, paying attention to body language. All of those are part of what we call the compassionate approach. We're compassionate because we can relate to how our loved ones are feeling. And we're not trying to talk them out of their feelings. We're not trying to artificially cheer them up. We really want to listen and hear their emotions. I like to say that we tune our ears to the emotional frequency. We're paying attention to the emotions that our loved ones are expressing, again, through body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. All of those are going to communicate more than words. Just like my words don't carry as much meaning as my body language. The same is true for our loved ones, especially as dementia progresses and language becomes more and more difficult. The words are not as important. They may not even be an accurate representation of what our loved one wants to say. And so we have to discern that through the process of listening. And listening is probably the most important skill in the compassionate approach. And interestingly, the most difficult to learn. When we talk to groups and do training classes in person, I often ask, so how many of you are naturally a good listener or naturally patient? And there might be one person in the group who says, oh yeah, that's easy. For most of us, it's not. It's just not easy to be patient. And we have to be patient in order to listen, to be really good listeners, to really tune in to what our loved one's saying. So you can get that handout. It's called Caring Conversations, and that'll be on our website as well. So any questions about the physical setup, the nuts and bolts?
Ben, can you talk a little bit about if someone's having trouble kind of getting started?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things that can be a little challenging, sitting there with a paintbrush, not quite sure where to start. Maybe a few tips for that, even for someone who's been an artist their whole life, or maybe someone who's never done art before.
Yeah, so many times people will say, oh, I'm not an artist, and there's this anxiety over trying to create things. And that's part of why we use an image. It gives people a place to start, to think about, and we call that an inspiration. So having an inspiration helps. Still, there may be a difficulty overcoming inertia just to get started. And so a couple of ways that we do that. One is just sitting down and talking, and looking at the image, talking about the image, and then maybe selecting a brush and asking, so what color shall we start with? And if your loved one can verbalize a color, great. Let's take that and get some paint on the brush, and then hand it off, and let your loved one do the work. Part of respecting the artist is not doing our work on their paper. So we say we never want to put paint to their paper. We want to let them do it, but we can help encourage by getting paint, putting it in their hand, see if that makes a difference. Sometimes it doesn't. So then I might say, may I help you? And I'll do what we call hand over hand. And I'll just gently guide the brush to the paper. And if I just touch the paper, that might be enough. And overcoming inertia, that's the key. Just get started. Start somewhere. Now, sometimes that doesn't work. And another way that I've done it is to take a pencil and look at the inspiration and say, let's see, what kind of shapes do we need here? Now, in this image, I've got some strawberries. And so I might take the pencil and just very lightly sketch the shape of some strawberries. And then ask, so what color shall we use for strawberries? Red, okay, let's see. Do we need a little bit of orange in that? So we can mix some colors, get it on the brush, hand it off, let go. So that's one of the ways. So just some basic shapes. There was a time I was working with an artist, and she had selected this wonderful picture of a kitten. And the face of the kitten was kind of oval with ears. And so I took a pencil and I just sketched a very light, simple oval and a couple of triangles for the ears. And then, okay, what color shall we start with? Is an orange tabby kitten. Shall we use orange? And that you can just see the artist's face in agreement, even though she wasn't verbal. So we got some orange for the tabby cat, and once she started doing that, then she could do it on her own. Another technique is what we call side-by-side painting. So I would sit down, if I'm facilitating, next to the artist. I'm looking at the same image, the same inspiration, but I'm doing my piece. And so I'm modeling what I want my loved one to do. I'm not trying to do it for them. I'm doing my own. And sometimes that will be all it takes to get started. And we can sit quite comfortably and work on our own pieces. And then it's interesting to compare my interpretation compared to her interpretation. So those are some of the tricks that we use to help people get started. It's really just overcoming that initial tension. I don't know what to do. I'm not an artist. Find a place to start, try it, see what happens. So thanks for asking that, Melissa. That's a really great point. All right, Melissa, let's go to the next slide. So just some other stuff. We have a book. What you're seeing here is the cover of the book. And this is a composite of 3 or 4 different paintings that some of our artists have done. The main one there, the rooster, hangs on my living room wall. One of my favorite pieces. And so this book is available. You can purchase it on our website. It's $30, and it's really like a coffee table book. It has some beautiful images of actual art and stories of the artists. So if you want to learn more about Memories in the Making, not only the history and the setup, the principles, how to implement Memories of the Making, you can get a hold of that book. Not required. That's an optional item. Our website has lots of information. As I mentioned, the materials list is on the Memories in the Making page of our website. For what we call community partners, for whether it's a memory care facility, a board and care, or an adult day program where they want to do Memories in the Making, we ask them to complete a community partner agreement that simply spells out what the guidelines of the program are, and that they commit to following the guidelines, and what we at Alzheimer's Orange County will do to support the community. So that community partner agreement form is also on our website, and lots of opportunities for volunteering, whether it's in Memories in the Making or other areas of the work that we do to support individuals and families who are affected by Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. Let's, yeah, some ways to connect with us. If you have other questions after we're finished here this morning, you can always call our helpline. Our helpline number is there. We have an amazing team of helpline specialists, social workers who are very experienced and can provide information, resources, and can help families talk through situations. If you're struggling with a particular issue, our helpline specialists can help you walk through that. We have a terrific Facebook page if you haven't found it already. In Facebook, you can search for Alzheimer's Orange County and like us as an organization. You'll get notified of upcoming events. We have lots of events going on all the time. And we also have a caregiver support group. Let me talk about support groups for just a minute. I got involved in this organization through a support group. When my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the social worker who gave us the results of all the tests and the conclusion handed us a piece of paper and said, here, call this number. You need to get into a support group. And we did. And boy, did that make a difference for us, and still does for me. Even though my wife can't attend a support group now, I still do. I'm actually in a couple of different support groups. And so we, in this day of isolation and we're stuck at home and our support groups aren't meeting in person, we have online support groups. You can join our Facebook support group and post a question or a comment, and other people will chime in. Some of our staff members may make suggestions and encouragement. So that's an opportunity. And there are support groups that are meeting via Zoom. So they are live video via Zoom. And if you're interested in that, you can get in touch with us to get more information about online support groups. And I've already mentioned our website, alzoc.org. In addition to Memories in the Making, we have lots of other resources that are available there. One last image, a painting that I just love. Man Chu painted, and he titled it "Happy Elephants." And I love the metaphor of elephants and memory. That the elephants have long-term memory, and the same is true of our loved ones. Short-term memory may be severely impaired, but long-term memory is probably still there, though they may have difficulty expressing it. Their memories are still there. And so we want to connect with those memories when we can. We want to honor those memories. We want to honor our loved ones as individuals, as artists. One of our coworkers coined this phrase, when words fail, art speaks. And that's really the essence of Memories in the Making. We want to give people the opportunity to communicate, to express themselves however they feel like expressing themselves. One other note on nuts and bolts. We don't have to go back to that slide, but I didn't mention music. You know, music has a powerful way of communicating, and so somewhere in the room, I would have music playing when we're doing art. Number one, it helps people to relax, and that's part of what frees their creativity. Especially if you can identify music that your loved one really resonates with. And usually that'll be music that they grew up with. You know, what were they listening to when they were teenagers and in their early 20s? And you may want to make a playlist, whether it's with music that you own that's on CDs or one of your electronic devices, or you use YouTube. You can create playlists on YouTube or Spotify or those music services and put together a whole string of songs that you know your loved one likes. And that's going to be energizing, it's going to be uplifting and relaxing, and it's going to facilitate the creative process.